All right, so we're going to make a class called Circle. I think this is the first time we're going to make a class without a main method. Okay, so we're going to write public class Circle, but we're not going to write public static void main, all of that stuff today. We're going to do that later. It's going to be in what we call our client class. We're going to have two classes, and they're going to be communicating together. Okay? All right, so we're writing a class. The purpose of this class is to simply declare objects. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. When we write our own class, there's three main things we want to do. One of those main things is we want to put what we call the state of that class. These are the properties of the object. These are called instance variables. Okay? Like the name implies, we're going to put variables here with information about this object, which is a circle. So if you think back to when you first learned about circles, one of the main properties of a circle is its radius. And that radius, you wouldn't say that the radius is false, so you wouldn't use a Boolean to store it, or probably not a string, right? So you'd probably use a double or an int, and I think a double would make the most sense. So I'll say double radius, okay? And I'm not going to put a value in there yet. I'm just going to declare to the computer that a circle has a radius, and I'll specify what that radius is later. Now, you may also put some more information in there. Maybe you'd put like the x-coordinate of its center, or the y-coordinate of its center, or maybe not, okay? It's up to you. All right, in addition to state, we're going to give this object constructors. Okay, now constructors define the state of the object. Okay, and what they also do is they also kind of create a communication link to our client class. And we'll learn how to actually remove that link later using a static method. But for today, this is going to be our connector between our client class and this object. Now, when you write a constructor, you're typically going to make it public. There's cases that you wouldn't, but for today, we'll make it public. It has to have the exact same name as your class. So if your class name is rectangle, then you would write public rectangle. If your class name was monster, you'd write public monster. But we're making a circle class, so we're going to say public circle. A constructor is basically like a special type of method. Remember, the computer distinguishes between methods and variables because methods end in parentheses and variables don't. Okay? So we're going to put those parentheses there. Anything we put inside of those parentheses are called parameters. Well, this first constructor I write is going to be called a default constructor. And it's a parameterless constructor. Okay? What that means is I'm not going to put any additional information into the parentheses. So if somebody wants to use my constructor to build a circle, they can. And they don't need to tell me anything about it. I'll do it for them. So by default, in other words, I'm going to choose what this circle looks like. Well, what does a circle look like? I mean, we know what it looks like, but what do we have to specify? Basically, if I told you guys to draw a circle, really the only question I would need to answer is what would be the radius. And so, since the user isn't picking the radius, I will. If I want to make it 100, I can. If I want to make the radius 3.14, I can. Okay? Typically, in a default setting, this isn't a rule. It's not like it has to be this way, but typically, in a default setting, we would set things to 0 if they're numeric, unless we have a reason to do something else. So I'll probably just go ahead and set this radius to 0.0 in my default constructor. Now, if the user wants to build a circle with a specific radius, I'll give them the opportunity through another constructor, and here's how. In this constructor, I'm going to require a parameter. So I'm going to say, okay, I'll let you pick the radius. Just tell me ahead of time what it is. So if they're going to use this constructor, they're going to put information in the parentheses when they use it that specify what that radius is. So in my other constructor here, this one, the parameter, okay, is used to initialize the instance variable. Okay, that's what we have up above right here. This is our instance variable. We're going to use that parameter to initialize it. Now, we've seen this before. When I've named two variables with the same name, we get an error. Today we're not going to. We're not in a static context today. We can actually have two variables with the same name. It's obviously going to cause some confusion. How's the computer going to know which one's which? Well, there's a way to do it. I'm going to show you guys on another day, though. I don't want to throw too much at you today. So for today, just to avoid confusion, I'm going to go ahead and just rename this variable to rad, okay, so that I can tell which one's which. Now, what I want is the user's going to give me a value for this in a minute. I'm going to show you how. And I want that value to be passed off to my instance variable. Well, remember that Java flows from right to left. Okay, so I'm going to say radius equals rad. And my thinking is here, okay, like I said, Java flows from right to left. So the value of rad is going to be put into radius. If I screw that up, it might screw up everything else in my program. So it's very important that we put the correct order here. I'll show you guys later this week what happens if we mess that up. Okay, now I've created a circle class. I've given it a property. I've given it two constructors. I'm now ready to go over to my client class and start making some circles. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make another class in this same workspace. I'm going to call it tester. Okay, I'm going to split these apart a little. If I hit compile right now, it's fine. They're two totally separate icons. Something's going to happen, though, when I change this tester class a little. Okay, now in this tester class, this is what we're going to call our client class. And we're calling it that because it's going to have a main method. So here's where I'm going to say public static void main string args. Now, I've never before used that term client class because we didn't really know there was any other type of class, okay? But when you have a main method executable, you call that a client class. Okay? My other class is just a class. I know that's kind of boring, but that's what it's called. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a link between these two classes by saying circle C1. Okay, so I'm declaring to the computer that I'm building a circle, and it's going to be stored in that variable name C1. We call that a reference. And like we did with the scanner before, remember how we built a scanner? We said new scanner. We're going to declare to the computer that this is a new circle. And I have two choices now. I can either leave the parentheses blank, like I did right there, or if I want, I can go ahead and make another circle. And this time I won't leave the parentheses blank. Instead, I'll put a number inside the parentheses. Okay? Now, the computer has two constructors to choose from. It will choose the proper one. It's going to use the default constructor for C1, since I didn't provide a number, and it will make its radius 0. And it's going to use my other constructor for C2 and set the radius to 1.68. If I put a double in there, it knows which constructor I'm talking about. If I don't put a double, it knows to go to the default constructor. So it can distinguish between the two. Okay? Now when I hit compile, that arrow wasn't there before, right? This arrow, it got put there right now because I told it to go there. Okay? The link was created when I created a circle object in my tester class. Basically now, in that tester class, if I use the C1 or the C2 reference, the computer's just going to follow that path over to the circle class, and it's going to find instruction for what to do. Okay?